So yeah, as you said, my name is Ignasi. I was thinking that maybe it's a good idea if the people can connect the cameras. I mean, because it's a virtual class, but it's difficult to know if people are paying attention or not. Well, I mean, if you can, please connect the cameras and I will feel more comfortable when I'm teaching. The idea is that this first week, we will use this methodology, problem-based learning. We asked you by mail before, some of you have previous experience, but most of you have never tried this methodology. You will see it's a fantastic methodology. So we will use it this first week. And then we thought that maybe it was helpful before starting working with that, give you this brief formation. It will take me, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes. And please, if you have any question or you can write in the chat, you can unmute and ask me directly, whatever you want. But please make me feel like I'm not alone in this virtual space. Wow, and now I see lots of faces, finally. Okay, so hello to Virtual Girona. And next week we will tell you real hello. I don't know if you saw, but there's like this small microorganism here. It's because I have COVID, so I feel okay. So it's not a big issue, but I'm not 100% perfect. So if I fall down when I'm teaching, just I don't know, Marta, do something to distract the people. So well, let's start. My idea for today. Let me try to move the menu because. Yeah, I see now. Okay, I couldn't see my PowerPoint. So the idea is what I told you. This is not like a standard class. There's not an exam about that. The only objective is that you understand the methodology because you will have to work with that methodology in 20 minutes or in half an hour. So it's please pay attention, ask me any detail, and if not, we will learn by practice. Yeah, so that's the idea of this class. I will start with a little bit of theory. I will explain you. In fact, my class is the opposite of this methodology because the methodology is not a teacher just talking, but well, we thought that it was necessary for this summer school. And the first question that I want to ask you is if you understand my English. Yeah? I know that there are no British people in the summer school, so we all speak, in our case, is Spanglish or Catalan-English, but I hope that you can follow a little bit. If you do, please click on the thumb up in your Zoom environment. And if you don't, please let me know, although we cannot solve it. So I'm sorry about that. So lots of people talking English, but we are not native English speakers. So the first thing about this methodology is just because probably it's your case that you are finishing your degree, or you're studying a master's degree, or you're starting a PhD degree. I don't know if you're aware of that, but really the incorporation into the labor market, people coming from academia and from the university, is really hard. Companies in general, they let us know that they are not happy with the formation that you receive at the university, that is like very theoretical. And here you can see like a list of the common comments that they make about the students that we provide to the labor market. So what the people say from companies is that in general, you as students are really used to just to listen and to study whatever they tell you to study. And that's not something very useful for a company. They said that your theoretical background is really strong. Sometimes it's even too strong, that you know too many things that maybe you will never apply in your professional life, but you really don't have lots of practical experience. It's normal because at the university, basically there are classes and some labs. Now more and more, most of the degrees, they have like a compulsory internship in a company, but it's like very short. And of course, you're not really working when you are in that company. So you are not, you never learn about how to work in a company. But they also said that you are not really used to analyze the information and to doubt about the things that people tell you. You have always been listening to a teacher that explains you things, and he's supposed to be an expert and he knows lots of things. So you think that that's true instead of checking if that's really true or not. And that's something that when you're working in a company, you really have to do. They also mentioned that in general, we are quite poor when we have to work in a team, especially if it's a multidisciplinary team, that we're really used to work individually. As you can see, most of these aspects in most of the degrees, they are trying to include now in the syllabus. So more and more there's like team building and working in groups, but still our dynamics are not very, very good. And in a company in general, we have to interact and exchange experiences with other professionals. And that's another of our difficulties. Looks like we are very bad in communication. So especially we have to speak with somebody that is not from our field. So that we are like very structured and we are flexible to change from one topic to another. A typical answer of somebody who is leaving the university and starting working in a company is, no, I never studied that, so I cannot do it. And for the company, they said, well, that's not, I mean, I don't care. I'm paying you to solve the problems, even if you didn't study that at the university. So the idea is that we are not, or you are not able to face new challenges. You are not proactive. And well, it's a long list of things that it's quite depressing when you leave the university after spending so many years studying. And that's the reaction in a company. So that's the image that they have about us. It's just people who are very good studying, very good passing exams, but that is difficult for us to adapt to the new requirements that we will find in a company. So what do they demand? So what they want is that we have these 21st century skills. When you have an interview to get a job, they know your background. They know that you studied environmental sciences or that you are an architect, you are an engineer. They see the list of the formation that you had in the past, but what they are looking for is for some people that they have these skills that they are very good in collaboration, in communication, and they have this creative and critical thinking. Yeah, this is called the 21st century skills. It's like a fashion, like a hot top, but I can tell you that this is really what the companies are looking for. So the companies, what they are looking is for a superhero, for a superwoman hero in this case, because now more and more, at least in my field, for the companies, it's also important to have like doctors and women and some other criteria. But the idea is that it's not enough having lots of degrees and lots of titles. I mean, you really have to perform like a superhero if you want to get a good job. So before we start with the theory, that's like it's like a question, but it's a virtual class, so I do not expect answer from your side. But think for yourself. When you were studying your degree, how many students were there in your class? I don't know if there were just 10, 15 students, or you were like up to 100 or 200. That's like too much, of course, for the interaction and to establish optimum dynamics in the class. I assume that in general, the teacher was giving you most of the material that it was required. So maybe a couple of times asked you to look for something, but the teacher always gave you exactly the material that you had to use, the literature. Also, in general, the classes is just the teacher explaining concepts and just once in a while asking you, do you have any doubt? And so sometimes you could ask some things. Sometimes even you have doubts and you think, well, I will solve it myself, or I will ask after the class. And because it's like difficult for us to ask in front of the whole audience with all our colleagues, with all the other students. And that's not good. That's not good to progress. My feeling is that, because I'm also teaching at the University of Girona, is that the students can pay attention for a while. They can be listening at the beginning of the class, but after a few minutes, they just disconnect. So they are not active. That means that they are not really motivated. The class can be very good sometimes, but even, I don't know, you have like 5 classes in a row. You start at 3 p.m., you finish at 8 p.m. So it's like almost impossible to be active all the time. So you don't take advantage of the class, no? And then my idea is that once you finish, in general, you remember like a couple of good teachers that you had. You remember maybe one class that was especially funny, or that you discovered something that was exciting for you. But if you assume that you've been spending hundreds and hundreds of hours, at the end, you just give a real value to, I don't know, 5% of the classes, 5% of the time that you spend at the university. And the main motivation when you are in academia, when you're at the university, is to pass the exam, and with a good mark. And that's a pity. That's a pity for the formation, and that's what we really want to avoid. So first, let me compare what's this problem-based learning methodology with conventional teacher-centered methodology. I insist, what I'm doing now is this conventional teacher-centered methodology. So I don't like it, but yeah, it was the only way to give this previous formation to our summer school. So with these two pictures, that's a little bit what happens. You can have a teacher explaining something. If you see in the right side, the teacher is even convinced that he gave a fantastic lecture. But if you pay attention to the students, they are thinking about if they will go to the cinema after the class, if they have to buy something for dinner, I don't know, whatever. So your brain is starting to fly and is leaving the class, so you're listening to the teacher all the time. So the idea is that the students, well, they just pay attention to the teacher once in a while, and they pay attention to the exam. So the only trick that we can say is you will not pass the exam, and that's important for the students. So really, attending those classes is not really engaging. It's not motivating, and for sure, the students with this kind of methodologies are not acquiring these 21st century skills that we said about critical thinking, communication, and team building or collaboration. So again, this is the image of this conventional teacher-centered education. There's like a teacher. The teacher is supposed to have lots of knowledge and experience. It's brilliant, it's fantastic, gives very good classes. So he's just talking to the students, and the students are just receiving information. What do we want to change? We want that the student is really the center of the education. So the idea is that the teacher is like in the middle of this circle, and we all are sharing the knowledge, the experience, and the beliefs, the hypotheses. So this interaction can be with single students, with groups of students, but it's all of us at the same level. In fact, the student should be the center of this formation. Yeah, I hope that these images are clear enough. And this is what we will try to do this week and next week in this summer school. So again, I'm repeating, but traditional learning means that I, as a teacher, I tell the students what they need to know. I give them the material, they study that, and then I give them a problem that in general is an exam, and they have to prove that they understood the concepts. While problem-based learning is the opposite. I give them the problem from the very beginning, and the students, to solve that problem, they have to identify what they need to know. So it's not that I'm telling them, they have to identify, they have to study that, and then they have to, with the things that they learn, they should try to solve the problem. Yeah, so that's a little bit the idea how it works. Yeah? So again, it's like, if we start in the left side, we will give the students like this, to explain briefly the context, and we will see all of us together a research problem. And then among the whole community, we have to start creating theories, discussing, evaluating, searching for information. We can establish any synergy among the students to formulate like a new theory to solve that problem. That's a little bit how it's working. Well, I hope that you understood a little bit. As a very brief discussion, a conclusion about this theory. I know that I didn't explain you yet how we'll implement that. But the first thing is that this semi-autonomous cooperative learning process, and you will see why it's semi-autonomous, because it's working in groups, but also working individually. You have to be in small groups, and this small group of students, and these students are faced with complex situations that if they are real is much better. And we do like that instead of receiving lecture-based classes or master classes. So this is like a very simple definition. So the idea is that the student is at the forefront of the learning process, and the teacher is just a coach, a guide, a facilitator. Is somebody who is in the group that you can ask, he can coordinate a little bit, but it's just one more person in the team. Yeah. What else? So as I told you before, the students are who have to formulate the learning objectives. So you have to take a decision about what you have to study. In fact, this is the first message that I want you to let you know. This week, we will not tell you what you have to study. You will have to take a decision about that. And how you will do it is because we will give you a situation and you will have to develop the questions that are necessary to answer that. You will have to look for the solution, and it will be an open problem. That means that it's not important if you solve it or not. It's just the excuse to start looking for information. The idea is that instead of just absorbing facts that an expert tells you, you will learn because you will have to look for those concepts. And the last thing is that really this teaching methodology is engaging students. You will see that you will create, you will question, you will revise knowledge, and this is the way how you will develop your skills in critical thinking, in collaboration, in communication, in reasoning, in synthesis, and in resilience in general. Yeah. So as I'm repeating a few things because I think that it's very important to highlight the message. So what's very important is that you don't have to solve the problem. I don't like this nomenclature about problem-based learning because the objective is not to solve any problem. But it's just to build some knowledge and to acquire some skills and attributes. Yeah. So about knowledge acquisition, group collaboration, and communication. So you will have to look for the information. You will have to ask those questions. As I told you, it's not necessary that you find the right answer, but what's very important is that you encourage yourself to think and that you provide innovative, creative, and open-minded solutions to the problem. That's a little bit the philosophy. Let me finish this first part of this talk with a brief comparison between problem-based learning and project-based learning. Lots of people are confusing those concepts. I understand because the name is very similar. Even the acronym is the same, it's PBL. But what we will use this first week is a problem. The second week is a project. So both are very good because they are focused on open-ended questions or tasks. Both help you to develop these 21st century skills. And both create this student independence and inquiry. Yeah. But there's like a brief difference is that problem-based learning is basically theory, and you just have to spend your time in looking for theoretical information, studying, analyzing, and discussing that information. While in a project-based learning that you will do it the second week in Girona, you have to look for real data. So you spend longer in the field. So it's a real problem that you have to look for data, for interviews, and you have to visit the scenarios. So it takes longer in general. It's also very useful. I like it a lot, but it takes longer and you learn something else than theory. You learn something practical too. Yeah, but it's not the same project than problem-based learning. You are lucky because in this summer school, we will use both project and problem-based learning. So again, this week, problem-based learning, second week, project-based learning. Most of the degrees, and especially at master level, you have applied project-based learning. The students, the teachers gave you a project, a small project that you have to do individually or in a group. As I told you, looking with field visits, looking for data, analyzing, making a final presentation, but it's different than problem-based learning. I don't know at this time if you have some specific doubts or questions about problem-based learning. Now it's the time to ask me, but you can ask me anytime. But if not, I will explain you how we can implement that and how we will implement that in this summer school. Yeah. So I assume that there are no comments in the chat. Nobody is unmuting the micro. So let's move on to the implementation. So now, very practical. First is that we will basically learn about one concept or one topic. Yeah, so it can be a wide topic with different aspects, but it's something quite limited. So it's not a whole course with lots of concepts. It's just about one topic that can have a few specific sub-objectives. Yeah, so that's the first thing. Problem-based learning, we will solve a problem, and that problem will be about one topic. The second is that this methodology cannot be applied with lots of students. So we need a small group of students. The optimal is between 8 and 12. And the optimal is that the students have a different background, yeah, because then they can provide different point of views and different solutions to the problem. That's why in the summer school that there are 30 students, we will split that into 3 groups of 10 students, because that's the optimal number of students to discuss about one problem. Let me remind you, it's not working in a team that then 10 people are too many. The idea is that we will discuss in a team with one teacher that will be in the same room. So to really enhance that discussion, you need more than 5-6 people. That's why I said that the number is between 8 and 12. And in that group, there's always the teacher. Yeah, so it's not, again, it's not a work of a group of students in a class or in a home, in the library. Is in the class with the teacher. But the teacher, as I told you, is not a teacher explaining his expertise and experience. It's just a guide, a facilitator, is in the room. If he doesn't speak too much, it's even better. Yeah. So there will be different face-to-face sessions. In our case, will be virtual sessions, so it's not so interesting, it's not so valuable. But there will be, but the idea is to have like different sessions that this group meet together. And in each one of the sessions, basically, there will be no master classes. Basically, there will be brainstorming, debate, and discussion. Yeah, that's the idea. So in general, these sessions are complemented with an activity that can be a simulation exercise, lab work, can be a site visit to a company or to a facility. Sometimes you can invite an expert to give a master class. So can be an activity that can complement the work that you are doing in the class, but this is not compulsory. So this is something that we always advise, but if we don't do it, no problem. In our case, if you remember the program, every day, but Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, there will be additional master classes that they will be not exactly about the same topic that you have to study, but will be complementary. Yeah, so it's a good way to receive like more information. And besides this brainstorming and this debate in the class, there will be lots of work, lots of homework that you have to do at home. And that's why it's important, because on one hand, it's generating work team and communication, but on the other hand, it's also forcing the student to work individually at home. So, so you acquire some autonomy for studying. So what else? So let's see a simple example. How we have implemented this methodology, because it's the methodology that we applied in a water resources science and technology master that we have at the University of Girona. So I took an example of wastewater treatment because it's my expertise and I feel more comfortable with that. So I think that I hope that with this example you will understand much better how we will implement that methodology. So there are 3 sessions. So the first session, it takes about 2 or 3 hours at master level. In our case, it will take 1 hour or 1 hour and a half. So don't worry, it will be shorter. And the idea at the University of Girona, when we implement that, is that we go to a room. There are 10, 12 students, and there's a teacher that I will call him a facilitator, because I want to avoid this level of teacher, because he's not really teaching anything. He's just in the room and he's one more. Yeah? But the students are the center, as I said before. Then how we start, and that's the first day, the first hour, before anybody is explaining anything about the topic. Remember that the topic was wastewater treatment. This facilitator is giving the students a real case or a real problem. So what the students do is that they read the problem. In general, there's like we nominate one reader in the group, and he's just reading for all the others, or you can read like individually, and then the discussion starts. What's an example of this kind of cases or problems? As I told you, it's called problem, but can be anything, can be an image, can be an explanation. And in this case, for this subject, it's a news from the European Commission press. Yeah, it's some news that they said that the European Commission was fining Spain for the lack of treatment for its wastewater. So that's what the students see. Should be something short, 1 page maximum. In this case, it's half a page. It's a little longer than this. You will see there are 2 slides. So the students receive this. I remind you that nobody has explained them what's wastewater. So maybe some of them know something. And the students read the news and they start identifying some keywords that they think that are important. So we are talking about treatment, we are talking about wastewater, we are talking about sensitive areas, secondary treatment, adequate treatment, risk to human health, surface water. I mean, there are some concepts that some students, maybe they know a lot about that, but some others, maybe they have no idea. As I told you, there are 2 pages. So this news, in this case, it's longer than half a page. We have these 2 slides. And in the second one, there are some other keywords, like some examples of contaminants or of pollutants, like organic matter, suspended matter, pathogenic microorganisms. It's talking about nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. It's talking about eutrophication, about seawards. It's talking about a law, a directive, European directive. So the students receive that, read, identify keywords, and what they do. So there are 10 students. So each one of the students should contribute with the knowledge that they have previously. For example, with this new, if there are students from environmental sciences, they can explain us, they can try to explain to the others about wastewater treatment, eutrophication. If there's somebody from biology, maybe can let us know about these microbial indicators. If there's somebody from engineering, can talk about facility design, what's this secondary treatment. And there are some concepts that nobody has no idea, but it's obvious because of the case study that it's something significant, something important. So the idea is that for 1 or 2 hours, all the students are sharing what they know and trying to identify what's very important. In general, the dynamics is that the people are talking all the time, so that's fantastic and it works. At the beginning, and it can happen today, people are shy or they don't know exactly when they can talk or when they shouldn't. So sometimes the facilitator has to intervene or has to coordinate a little bit, or he can ask to some students that they don't mention anything, or if the students start talking about something very different than the real objective. Like, for example, imagine that they start talking about drinking water, and this is just about wastewater. The facilitator can tell something to the student. But in general, the dynamics are very, very good. And at the end of this first session, that I remind you that is like for 2 or 3 hours, the students should agree. They should have like a list of the learning objectives that they think that for that week, they should study about wastewater treatment. Yeah, so they should include all the theory that they think that they can find, study and understand in 1 week to understand those news about why Europe was fining Spain for not having wastewater treatment plants for small communities. Yeah, and that's the objective of the first week. And this is the first objective for our class today. Yeah, at the end of the class, not my class, but when we start with the PBL, with the 10 students, that's the objective for today, is that you go home with a list of the things that you have to look for the information at home or in the library. Yeah. An example of the learning objectives, those are the official objectives that we require for the case study that we show you. Of course, the students cannot find the same list, but should be something similar. In this case, is that they should worry about, okay, should we know where the wastewater is coming from and what's the main composition, what are the main pollutants? Then should we worry about why should we treat wastewater? Why is there any environmental impact about that? They should think that there's also about legislation. Yeah, we're talking about directives and limits, and so maybe, and then about the treatment. What's the typical flow diagram? What are the typical units and trains to treat wastewater, especially the water line, because in this master there's another subject for the sludge line. So if the students start talking about the sludge, the teacher can tell them, well, don't worry about that. Don't worry about water reuse. That will come in another unit. So he can put a little bit the center of the topics is if it's too wide. And another of the objectives is that the students understand a little bit about the mechanisms of biological removal. That's why it was talking about secondary treatment, about what are the main configurations for BNR, for biological nutrient removal, and also, if there's time and energy, some basics about design. That's also another of the official objectives of this week. This is what, if instead of using problem-based learning, if it was the teacher just talking, the teacher would have shown this list at the beginning and would have been explaining about each one of the topics. Yeah. So, yeah, as I told you, with that list, the students work individually at home. You can organize yourself. Sometimes the team is like, okay, you take those two topics and I take the third topic, but it's not optimal. It's better that everybody is studying or looking for the information for each one of the points to develop the learning objectives. So that's the end of the first session, the first day. Then we meet again. In our case, we meet on Wednesday. So they have like 2 days to look for that information. The same students, the same teacher, and in the same room, they meet again. And what's the objective? Is that the students share among all of them. In general, they have a Google Drive, comment and discuss all the material that it was collected. Yeah, so we start for the first point, that it was origin of wastewater. And one of the students that's volunteer starts and he said, well, I found this information, I found that paper, I found that book. And you can compare the information that you found among all the students. And it's not only that you found information, is that if you analyze a little bit, you can also change a little bit the ideas of each one of the points to see if all of us understood the same. Sometimes there are some doubts, you can ask among them, you can try to solve those doubts. And that's the idea, to discuss all the material that was collected. Again, the facilitator is just in the room. If the dialogue doesn't move on, he can ask some questions. He can especially give the voice to the students who are more shy, who are more quiet, just to make them intervene. But what's good at the end is that the own student is able to talk, even if he's shy. It's one of the objectives. It's one of the skills that you have to acquire and you have to develop in problem-based learning. Yeah. So that takes for 2-3 hours. Again, that's a long session because you are sharing all the information. It's not necessary to give the class about all the points, but with the discussion, for some points, you really have to go in detail and you have to compare the information that you found. And at the end is when the facilitator shows the official learning objectives, and then you compare what you were looking for with what you have identified. So let me show you again. The first day, the students didn't see this. They created a similar list. At the end of the second session, you can see this list and you can compare. In general, most of the topics were there, but maybe the students didn't think about basic design, or maybe they didn't include current legislation. It doesn't matter. The teacher doesn't have to tell them the first day. It's enough if the second day they discover that there are like some additional points. So the objective of this comparison is to see like these missing points, and also, now let me go again to and also to agree about what topics should be further developed. So maybe you found something about legislation, but you just found the legislation in Catalonia because you just found information of the Catalan Water Agency. And maybe it's good that you find information about legislation all over Europe, or even to compare with other countries and continents. Yeah, so that's the second session. And then at the end of the second session is the same. Each student is going home or is going to the library, looks for new sources of information, study that, try to analyze, try to understand, and is preparing himself for the third session. And I'm almost finishing. That's the third session. The same students, the same teacher, the same room. You can change the room if you want to, but the same group of people meet again, and that's the last stage. So the students, again, they share the information, they comment, they discuss. And in this case, the facilitator or the students have to try to close any open question and limit the depth of each one of the topics. Because the students are a little worried, like, about design, should we go further? We didn't know exactly how to design a secondary settler, or there are lots of kinds of secondary settlers. Well, the teacher can tell them, well, this is not so important, or yes, this is, so please look for that information. At the end, the students compile the material. Remember that they identify the topics, they look for the material, they discuss the material, and now they have like a collection of material in a Google Drive, and this is what they will use to study for the exam. Yeah. In this case, there's an additional design exercise, or sometimes they visit a real wastewater treatment plant. Yeah, this is just for the example that I'm explaining you. And at the end of the week, of the third sessions, the students are evaluated. So are evaluated about what? So about the knowledge that they had to learn and about the personal skills. How they do it for the knowledge. For the knowledge, the knowledge means all those learning objectives, legislation, wastewater treatment, origin, design, VNR, blah, blah, blah. There's an exam. In general, it's not the same week. There's an exam at the end. In fact, one subject has a few PBL units, so maybe it takes a few weeks to develop the whole course. So at the end, there's like an exam that in general, it's individual. So you have to show that you knew about, that you understood those concepts. And this exam, it has different weight, but in general, it's like 50% of the final mark. Some teachers, they also like to evaluate any report that you have done in the complementary activity, like the design exercise, for example. Sometimes the presentations that you do during the sessions can be also evaluated. And sometimes even your performance about the ideas or hypotheses that were generated. Wherever you want to apply, these criteria have to be very clear before you start the PBL, and the students should know how you will evaluate them. If you just do an exam, it's just an exam. And about the skills, the teachers, they have a template, and at the end of the week, on Friday, in our case, gives a personal feedback to each one of the students about how they perform with the selection of the sources of information, and if the analysis that they made was critical and good. So there's not enough in bringing lots of papers and books. You have to really understood about those sources of information, about the attitude with respect to the course. So how responsible you were. You were coming to the class, you were looking for the information, and to the team. So you can evaluate things like the respect, collaboration, the empathy. And the last aspect that you have to evaluate is the communication abilities. This communication can be just in the discussion among the students, or maybe sometimes they give like formal presentations. So that's something that you can also evaluate. And that evaluation is very important because it's the only way that the students give real value to the skills. So, and that in our case, it's 50% of the final evaluation of the subject. So it's very, very important. So as you can see, and I'm almost finishing, the teacher must inhibit the tendency to give information. We are used to, especially old teachers like me, we are used to, we've been teaching for 30 years, just talking and talking like I'm doing now. So we have to avoid that. And our role is be a facilitator, a supervisor. We can organize something or dynamize if the group doesn't perform well. And at the end, we are the evaluators of the students with the exam and with the personal skills. While the students, they cannot have a passive attitude as you are having now. Probably, I'm not even sure if you are not paying attention to me. So we need like this active participation, this positive attitude. We need your initiative. We need you to be open-minded. And we would like that you can organize yourself. So there are like different roles in the group of students. One can behave as secretary, another can be the moderator, another can be the rapporteur, You can do it without roles. It doesn't matter. Especially this week will be hard because you don't know each other. Everything is virtual, but take into account that in general there are different roles, and sometimes you can evaluate the other students. So I didn't mention that, but sometimes there are some teachers that ask the students to evaluate themselves or even to evaluate the other students. We will not do it this week, but it's also interesting because you will see that it's not so easy to evaluate the personal skills of the students. So just to conclude, the first is that I really believe that the future of teaching goes through the application of innovative methodologies. We need that your students are in the center of the whole process. It cannot be just a teacher talking and giving master classes. Working in small groups is interesting, and debate and discussion, it's also, you will see, it's a fantastic way to acquire personal skills, and this is what you will need when you work in the market in a company. The second point is that not only knowledge, the companies let us know, but it's very important that skills and attitudes are very important for a successful professional career in the future, and not only for a professional career, it's just in life in general. Skills and attitudes are more important than knowledge. That's very important in our sector, the environmental sector, because it's really multidisciplinary. There are people from geography, from environmental sciences, there's people from law, from economy, there are engineers, really narrow-minded. So we need a new generation of professionals who are able to talk and to understand among them at any level, with operators, but with politicians. And problem-based learning, really, you will see that promotes this self-learning and is very engaging. So it's very good to improve your teamwork abilities. And at the end, you feel more happy and satisfied if you are part of the whole learning process than if you just listening to a teacher. I just give you a small list of the literature that I used to prepare this PowerPoint. I mean, it's not necessary that you check all of them. Of course, you will have work this week to learn about other aspects of the summer school. The last link is a very short video edited and published by the University of Maastricht that in 4 or 5 minutes explains you the problem-based learning methodology, and so will be much better than my 40 minutes talk. And that's all. If you have any question, please let me know. I don't see you because yeah.